All guests on ZASLOW Show 2.0 brought to us by the official beer of the program, Johnny Cuba. European roots with that Caribbean soul. You know, we're talking about a refreshing German lager in a can. Pick up a 6-pack of Johnny Cuba. But go to johnnycuba.us. You find the nearest location to you. That's how you enjoy the weekend. We got Thursday night football. It's football every night, right? Make sure you always drink responsibly. And don't forget Johnny Cuba's mantra, stay tranquilo. Our pal, of course, every Thursday throughout the football season, he joins us, gets us ready for our fantasy football lineups. Likely your championship weekend began yesterday. Jamey Eisenberg, CBS Sports Fantasy Football expert. So, Jamey, good to have you aboard. Happy Hanukkah. Happy holidays. Thanks for joining us as always. First, though, the games yesterday, terrible games. Are we going to get the narrative that, it's because the NFL, they're scheduled games 4 days apart from the previous game, and NFL doesn't care about player safety? Are we going to get that narrative? That's why the games were so bad?
I mean, you're going to get that from some people. I think, the people that know these teams realize that you got two potential Super Bowl contenders and two teams that are probably pretenders. I don't think you would have expected the scores to be that different, the differential to be that bad. But, the Chiefs and the Ravens are on a different level than the Steelers and the Texans. I think any playoff team wants to face those two teams, probably the Texans more so than the Steelers at this point. The short turnaround did not help. I'm sure the unprepared teams or the the teams that are a little bit struggling right now from mostly an offensive standpoint. The Steelers offense, you thought, okay, maybe they get George Pickens back, they could do some things, and the Chiefs not having Chris Jones, their best defensive player, they struggled. And the Texans are just, I think, have been in the tailspin really, since the middle of the season. Once Stephon Diggs went down, and then, you had Nico Collins missing some time, and now they lose Tank Dell. There's just no offensive continuity right now. The offensive line is a mess. And I think defensively, they've been missing a lot of guys as well. So, you ran into probably the MVP, if it's not Lamar Jackson, it's Josh Allen. And that if we were probably judging from the second half of the season on, Patrick Mahomes would be in the conversation too, especially when you factor in the Chiefs record. So, two great offenses, two defenses that have certainly been great Chiefs defense has been great all season. Ravens defense has turned things around lately. So it just was, I think, kind of like the college playoffs. You saw, disparity in just talent and situation, and just that's how it worked out.
Feels like the Steelers are done. Yeah.
I think so. They were an overachieving team most of the season. They didn't play their division, first division game until, I think it was like week 10. The Chiefs are just a better team, and the Ravens are a better team, So what they've had to face the last, month of Ravens twice, Chiefs, Eagles, you're playing some of the best teams in the league. And then they go and they beat up on the Bengals, and okay, everybody beats up on that Bengals defense, So it's just one of those situations where you'd like to see the Bengals in the playoffs. You probably like to see the Dolphins in the playoffs. You probably like to see, I'm saying from a viewer standpoint, you probably like to see maybe even the Colts in the playoffs just because of the Anthony Richardson experience. I don't think that's a good team. But, Dolphins, when Tua's there, they're obviously a much more competitive team, and you've seen that. The Bengals are one of the most fun offenses to find, and they've kind of found a little bit of rhythm here with their defense against some poor opponents. So, yeah, the Steelers feel like they're done, and so do the Texans, to be honest with you.
That was my biggest takeaway from yesterday was you watch the first game with the Steelers, and then you watch the second game with the Ravens, and it's like, Ravens are so much better than the Steelers. Like, what are we talking about here? Anyway, tonight, though, Thursday Night Football. NFL's every day now, all right? Thursday Night Football, Seahawks at Bears. Let's get after it here. If you're still active in your fantasy football league, you're likely playing in your championship game this weekend. You're in an amateur league if you're stretching this thing out to week 18. All right. Seahawks, Bears, what do we like tonight?
There's some potential league winners in this game. Zach Charbonnet stepping in for Ken Walker. He's played 4 games. He started 4 games that Walker has missed, and he's been a stud in certainly 3 of them, 13.3 PPR points or more. So a starter in all 4, but 3 dominant games. And this Bears run defense has been a joke all season long. So he could go nuts. So if you have Zach Charbonnet, you should be very excited about this. And then Keenan Allen has just become a superstar for Caleb Williams lately. 4 of his last 5 games, over 20 PPR points. Those are quarterback numbers, So when you're looking at what these two guys can do, must-start players across the board. DJ Moore has been basically a number 2 receiver for the majority of the season, so you're starting him. And for Seattle, Jackson Smith-Njigba, I should have mentioned him in the must-start guys. What an absolute, breakout season he's having. So must-start guy as well. Keenan Allen and JSN are borderline number 1 receivers for me. Then you start to stretch that out a little bit. I think Geno Smith has a chance to help you if you need him. Caleb Williams has really turned into a good fantasy quarterback and starting to look a little bit better as a real life quarterback, but excited about his potential for next year. But for this game, he could certainly be a starter. Seattle's defense has given up a lot of points to fantasy quarterbacks. DK Metcalf's tough to trust. He did score last week. I thought there was going to be a little bit more attention to him because the offense coordinator was glowing about how much we have to get the ball to him and get, feed the big guy, all those things. And he had 7 targets, in a game where Geno Smith threw over 40 times. So he's a little tough to trust. Number 3 receiver. If you've been starting him, you start him just because it's a really good matchup. Aside from those guys, unless I'm forgetting somebody, Romo Dunze is more of a, desperation flex, and DeAndre Swift is a little tough to trust.
Let's look at Saturday slate. We got 3 games on Saturday. Let's start with Chargers and Patriots.
So we got to keep an eye on J.K. Dobbins. If he comes back, I think he's worth starting. If not, Gus Edwards is a good desperation play. He didn't do great in the first 3 games without Dobbins, but he played some, somewhat difficult run defenses. And then he has the 2 touchdowns and his longest run in 5 years against the Broncos. And so now you're taking on a Patriots defense that's allowed 3 running backs in a row to basically go over 100 yards rushing, 96 yards or more in 3 straight games. So he's not a bad plug and play if you're stuck at the position. The receivers for the Patriots are hands off. Really, everything for the Patriots is hands off because the running back situation is a little tough to peg right now. We'll see what's happening with what Gerard Mayo says, because he's talking about benching Ramondre Stevenson for his 3rd fumble, 7th fumble, 3rd lost fumble. It really cost him the game against Buffalo. And the Chargers receivers, Ladd McConkey's worth starting as at least a number 2 receiver. Quentin Johnson, to me, is somebody that's a little just tough to trust. He had another bad drop in that Thursday game against Denver. Justin Herbert's a borderline starter. Not a bad matchup, but it feels like it's going to be a low-scoring game.
Now, the other 2 games on Saturday, major playoff implications. Broncos-Bengals. Go.
Love this game. You're starting all the Bengals that you've been starting. Burrow, Chase, Higgins, Chase Brown. I mean, they're studs. And it's a great defense. One of the receivers is going to struggle a little bit because they'll see Patrick Surtain, but you can't bench them, so they're just too good. You just got to hope that, you get a Zay Flowers type game, one of the better receiving performances against the Broncos this year. Obviously, Jerry Jeudy did as well, but that was with Riley Moss not playing. He's expected to come back. The corner who starts opposite Patrick Surtain. For the Broncos, Bo Nix is my start of the week. You're not starting him over the studs, but over the questionable guys. I think he's got an opportunity here to build off what he's done. 20 or more fantasy points in 3 straight road games. This is not a defense that you fear. They're 6th in most fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks. And then Cortland Sutton's a must-start guy. Now, the running back situation is interesting for the Broncos because this is a team you can run on, and they just don't have a running back that you trust. So if McLaughlin is out, I think Javonte Williams is a flex. If McLaughlin is in, then I think it's just messy. You just got to, if you're stuck, I would probably lean towards Williams because he just came off a game with 7 catches on 11 targets. And so running backs that catch the PPR, he's going to have an opportunity to help you.
What about the Cardinals and Rams? And as far as Marvin Harrison goes, he was a pretty high pick for a rookie this year in fantasy. Are fantasy owners, you think, pleased with him, or has he been a disappointment?
Oh, he's been a bust, and it's unfortunate because there's so much talent there. I think the system has to change a little bit in Arizona to help him because they don't do him any favors. Not a lot of pre-snap motion. Route tree needs to expand, but that's for any rookie. So we'll see what this offseason brings for him. But no, you can't trust him.
Where do you think he'll go next year?
I think he'll be a round 4, round 5 pick because receivers get pushed up. And again, there's just so much talent there that you don't want to overlook what he can do. I mean, last time he played the Rams
this year, he was like a late 2, early 3.
Yeah, he was a round 2, round 3 pick, depending on when he went. I took him in round 2 in a few leagues, and it cost me. Just again, looking at what the potential target share could be. So we'll see what this offseason brings. Cardinals melting down at the end of the season, so there might be a coaching change from a coordinator standpoint. I don't think Gannon's going anywhere. So next year, I think round 4, round 5 is about where he'll settle. Kyler scares me. Anytime that there's nothing to play for with a quarterback that gets mopey, I'm a little worried. And this Rams defense has been great, down the stretch. They gave up a huge game to Josh Allen, but that's, more Allen, I think, than the Rams defense. They shut down Purdy. They shut down Rodgers. They shut down Jalen Hurts. I mean, they've done a really nice job. So James Conner may not play. Trey Benson will be next man up. If Trey Benson doesn't play because he missed last week, then Michael Carter could be a desperation running back. So you could be looking at somebody off the waiver wire to help you. Trey McBride's really the only must-start guy for the Cardinals for me. And I do think that the Rams offense goes nuclear because the Cardinals, again, nothing to play for. They've given up some big games to offenses in the last 4 games. And I just think the Rams, back-to-back road games in bad weather, coming back home indoors. Stafford should go off. Kyron Williams going to definitely go off no matter the weather. He's been great. And Puka and Cooper Kupp. Kupp's been the one that's tough to trust, but I think he's potential back in your good graces this week.
All right, let's look at the Dolphins. 4:05 on Sunday, Dolphins at Browns. What do you like there? And do you believe that Tyreek Hill has played his last home game as a Dolphin?
I don't, unless they're going to trade him. He's still such a key part of this offense. I don't think they're cutting him. So if somebody wants to trade for a 31-year-old receiver with that contract, okay. But I'd be surprised if they got rid of him, unless he just forces his way out. But I still think that there's a lot for this Dolphins offense to offer. Going to have to address the offensive line because I think it's a big part of this. But look, they have a chance. I think if you run it back next year to hopefully healthy Tua, you can make a run. There's still lots to like about this team. I love the Dolphins defense this week, mostly because of who they're playing. So they've done a nice job. Look, they did a great job against San Francisco. Obviously, you've seen some good performances down the stretch here. And so this Browns offense is terrible. Just scored 6 points last week, 7 points the week before. Dorian Thompson-Robinson, I don't think is really an NFL quarterback. So he's going to take some sacks. He's going to throw some interceptions. There could be a pick six here. They're my number one defense for the week, the Dolphins. So really excited about this matchup against the Browns. The Browns really are hands off for everybody except for Jerome Ford and if David Njoku starts. But Njoku's dealing with a knee injury on top of a hamstring injury, so he may not play. And for the Dolphins, look, you're starting your main guys. You're starting Tyreek, you're starting Jonnu Smith, and you're starting Devon Achane. Tua is more of a borderline quarterback. If they can run the ball like they did last week, which I think they can, then it's going to be a little bit of a down game for Tua.
I got one more for you here, Jamey. Packers-Vikings, probably the game of the day on Sunday. What do you like there?
Everybody. I mean, the one thing that's interesting with the Packers, I shouldn't say everybody because there's not must-start receivers, but if you hope, and it's really hope, that the Packers are going to throw the ball, then Jordan Love could have an absolute monster game. He did in the first game against the Vikings in week 4 because he threw it over 50 times. He had 389 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, 3 picks. But they've been 28 pass attempts or less in, I think it's 6 or 7 straight games because the run game has been so successful. Well, the Vikings are the number 2 run defense in the NFL. So when Jordan Love does throw, he puts up numbers. Now, who the receivers are you could trust? Well, Christian Watson's dealing with a knee injury, may not play. Jaden Reed has been touchdown or bust. He hasn't had a good game since the Dolphins game. He had 3 catches in that game, scored 2 touchdowns. That was Thanksgiving night. Since then, he just hasn't done very much. Dontavian Wicks would be the fill-in for Watson if he doesn't play. He scored 2 touchdowns against the Vikings last time because Watson was out. So potential plug-and-play receiver there. And then Romeo Doubs just touchdown dependent. So he would be also in play again if you think if the Packers are going to throw. For Minnesota, you know what you're doing. You're starting Sam Darnold. He's been awesome. That's going to be a fun offseason to watch what they do at their quarterback position. Aaron Jones, revenge game again. You're starting him. And Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison have been fantastic. Obviously, Jefferson's the best receiver in football, right there with Jamar Chase. And Addison has just been an absolute stud. Scored twice against the Packers in the first meeting, 1 on the ground. But he's had a good track record against the Packers in 3 straight games against them in his career.
Great job as always, Jamey. Tell everybody how they can hear you leading up to tonight's game and then throughout the weekend.
You can watch our podcast, Fantasy Football Today. You can find it on YouTube. CBS Sports HQ is our 24-hour streaming network, and CBSSports.com for all of our written content.
Great job, Jamey. Thanks, man. Appreciate you all season long. Really terrific.
It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Happy holidays to you and everybody watching and listening, and I'm sure we'll catch up soon.